Hello, this is going to be a mini review by Midwest Reviews of the franchises for Transformers Armada, Energon, and Cybertron. So, welcome to a review of the Unicron Trilogy. Okay, I'm just going to throw a little disclaimer out there. I'm going to be using images from the games, the comics, and even screen captures from the shows. But what I'm going to be referring to is the show that was shown here in the United States. So to kind of get started, we're going to open up with Transformers Armada, the first and what I consider the best component of this entire series. It started off really well. We had Optimus, Red Alert, and Hotshot. And as time went on, that side of the show expanded where they added more and more Autobots until it was pretty much equaled out on both sides, Autobot and Decepticons. The second thing I want to mention is this idea of pursuing minicons. It was a new, fresh idea, and to be honest, it was one of the better ones. At first I thought, well, that's kind of stupid. Megatron has all the Decepticons, why would he need the minicons? But as I look back in retrospect, it's a good idea. The more minicons, the more powers you can, possess, and even in the game that was hinted at, each one of them gives you a special ability. So really, and if they are component cells of Unicron, why not? As we know, Megatron eventually one day would become Galvatron, but we'll save that for later on in the discussion. I liked how they introduced new characters such as Jetfire. He may have not always seen eye to eye with Optimus, but then again, he was one of the better characters. He was the first flying Autobot that was actually shown in the show. Hotshot and what was his name? It was Blur. He's actually one of my favorite characters, believe it or not. They had limited flight, but Jetfire was the first flying Autobot to be introduced in the show. And to be honest, he had an attitude to him, and he was kind of cool about that. Not as much as Blur, but, Blur is just really kind of, he's just a boss. And then they introduced Tidal Wave, another one of my personal favorites. Tidal Wave, just all around, he may have not been the sharpest tool, but he was massive, he was cool, and as far as I recollect, besides G1, there's been no other Transformer to be a aircraft carrier or battleship. So anyway, and also the fact that he could combine with Megatron, how cool is that? Megatron now had the ability to fly and take on Optimus. So you can see they try to equal things out. As far as character development, Megatron, Optimus, and all the characters all around, I felt were taken down a notch though. The storytelling was actually good as it got farther along, but as always, Hasbro tries to put in these kids in the show so that the kids watching it can, I guess, relate or something like that. But I don't think it really matters, because in my opinion they detract from the show, and that's kind of sad when you think about it. Because think about it, they have these awesome story about these robots, but then these annoying kids come along and they're just like, "Oh, save us! We're so useless, but we're such a great help." And it's like, no, you aren't. Just go away, And really, they had to dumb down the characters a little bit to make the humans seem like they were useful. That's what detracts from the show and all the ones that Hasbro puts out, is they try to make the kids where they can relate to it. Well, the rest of us that actually have an IQ, that are growing up, that watch this, are like, man, this is really degrading towards my intelligence. Otherwise, you know what, it's a great show. They had a great concept. Besides the points where they were dumbed down, as they got further along with both Optimus and Galvatron, and they actually were halfway decent, with the Beast Wars actors reprising their roles for a different universe's counterparts. It's really awesome. David Kaye and Gary Chalk did a great job. I wish the minicons would have had a voice instead of sounding like R2-D2, but we can't help that. Again, just the interaction between all the different characters was really good. Storytelling was excellent as it went along. Such introductions of characters such as Scavenger did not see that coming. You know, his toy was released. You're like, okay, he's an Autobot, but yet in the show he comes off and he's like, oh, I'm Decepticon, and then later on you're like, oh, so he's not really. Okay, well that was all right. Otherwise, he was a really cool character. Sideswipe in Armada, he was not cool at all. He was rather kind of annoying because he was a wimp. There's no getting around that. He was a wimp. Sideways, one of the most hated characters ever. The idea of a independent Transformer, really interesting. Only to find out later he's serving Unicron. So his development was kind of rushed, but you got what they were trying to pull across with him. And he ended up being one of the most hated Transformers in the series. Starscream. This is a different departure because all previous incarnations of Starscream, deceitful, devious, just totally arrogant, and some of those characteristics came across, but more or less, he was the only Decepticon that had a good heart, which was strange, considering that's kind of a polar opposite to Generation 1 Starscream. But overall, his character was, you really kind of felt for this character. You liked this version of Starscream. So again, a bold departure that went in a good direction for this show. Again, just the team up of these minicons with their partners was kind of interesting. Starscream's a jet, but yet he had a race car partner. Power of the land and ground. That was some line they used. That was kind of stupid. Pairings, I think, could have been better, but you know what? Not all of them were a big flop. Again, Starscream in the game was more like his G1 counterpart. But then again, we're not talking about that, are we? Alrighty, we approach the end of Transformers Armada, and what do we see? We see the Autobots and the Decepticons teaming up, and this was a great idea because we've never really seen this before. In Generation 1, they would do it for an episode or so, and then before the end of the episode, they'd be duking it out again. This spanned a story arc that you never saw coming, and it was done quite well. Ultimately, in the end, though, you see the characters die, and, of course, Galvatron, in uncharacteristic style, sacrifices himself. Overall, I think it was the amount of surprises in the show were well worth it, and it started off what could have been a great three-part series, introducing new characters, the story getting better as it went along, the kids becoming less annoying, and ending on Unicron, no less. That was a high note, something that we did not expect to see. His previous appearance had been, well, his real appearance had only been in Generation 1. He was homage to in Beast Wars, but here we actually have an appearance of Unicron, and he actually was portrayed in a serious light. He wasn't just kind of characterized or just kind of written off as your stereotypical bad guy, but he actually posed a serious threat. And the characters in the show were like, okay, well, maybe we need to stop beating each other over the head and actually, I don't know, fight this guy. So, ultimately, good show, and we're just going to leave it at that for Armada. Okay, I just wanted to mention this really quickly. I know I said this was going to be a mini review. It looks like it is most definitely not going to be. So just bear with me. As we cover the next two sections, it's going to speed up a little bit. We spent the most time on Armada. These next two sections don't deserve that much time because they were not that great. So just kind of bear with me for a little bit. Alrighty, we're going to move on to Energon. At first, whenever this first came back in 2004, I was all on board for it. I thought, dude, this is awesome. Back then I was still actually collecting them. I'm not going to tell you how old I was. You know, it was really interesting because I thought this is going to be a good concept. This is going to be even better than Armada. This is going to be awesome. Megatron, all the character designs look cool, except for Fatimus Prime. You know what? I was disappointed because they made it this episodic space odyssey, and it just came to this point. So anyway, without further ado, we're going to move on to the breakdown of this series, mentioning only things that need it. The picture you see here is of a Photoshop version of Optimus, as probably he should have been portrayed. In the show, we joked about him being Fatimus Prime because his character design was awful. One of many, actually. When we first saw them, we thought they were cool, and later on, we're like, no, they really aren't. This would have been better as the way to portray him. Really, you know what? It doesn't really matter. Let's just move on. The next picture I'm going to show you is of actually a lineup of sorts, not a full lineup, obviously, of the Armada character, or Energon characters. You see the Terracons and Omnicons there in the foreground, the Combiners in the background. You know what? Overall, the range of characters that was introduced in the show, it feels like they spent less time on it than they did in Armada. It was just like, okay, we've got to get these toys shipped out, so let's just throw them in there, and even though that's not how it probably really went. But it just felt rushed. They were just thrown in there. They didn't even spend time. They're like, okay, we're going to throw 3 in there. Bam, they're done. They did have a few exceptions. Wing Saber was one of them. Shock Blast was another. So they did on certain ones, but the ones that didn't really matter, they don't really count, I guess. When the show picked up, they were on this peaceful era of Cybertron. No problems whatsoever. But eventually, what happens? If there's no action, there's no show. So after a series of attacks, you have the Autobots trying to get their stuff together, and they're all like, we need to figure this out. Well, not too long after that, what happens? After the bad guys are kind of revealed, Megatron, who was previously Galvatron, for as much as that doesn't make sense, or does, reappears, and we're off and running again. So ultimately, they introduced a character which none of us really cared for, Alpha Q, and his minions, and ultimately, he was annoying in a lot of the way it ran. Really, okay, yeah, he was essential to the story, but could it not have been done better? Sure, he was nowhere near as a threat as the original Quintessons were, but then again, this isn't G1, this is the Unicron Trilogy we're talking about. Optimus' character stayed mostly the same. He didn't have to be dumbed down in this series. Hotshot kind of matured, but they kind of sidelined him. He really wasn't as prominent as he was in Armada, which was kind of sad. But then again, there's our favorite Megatron. Character design, totally awesome. He's a flying gunship. He was a little bit more brutal, a little bit more hands-on in this series. And to be honest, you see the tactical genius in this part of his portrayal. When he comes back, he's been trapped inside Unicron for about 10 years, so he's a little angry. But you kind of see a side of Megatron where you're like, you know what? He's actually a lot tougher now. And then there was that little trifle where him and Scorponok were like, oh, I'm the boss, and ultimately Megatron shows him up for not being the boss. Otherwise, you know what? Megatron's just cool, and I feel like they kind of underscored Scorponok a little bit as things went on, but you know what? The show was not as great as its predecessor. We're just going to leave it at that. Shock Blast. Excellent character. I feel it was kind of bad how they ended his little stint on the show. He filled the void that Starscream left. That I'm going to take your place, I'm going to overthrow you, you're done for, Megatron type role. And even though they had his brother later on take on that role after Shock Blast had died, it was just kind of like, really kind of weak how he was KO'd. Overall, he wasn't as annoying as you think he might be. He wasn't Shockwave, but then again, uh, this is a fresh take on that sort of character, and I feel it was done very well with Shock Blast. One of the things I liked is the way it started off was the whole series. It started off picking up where they left off. You would see character designs from Armada. You would see them in their forms, and sure they had different paint apps, but ultimately, you felt a sense of continuity. I'm a big fan of seeing previous stuff make a return appearance. So when you see Megatron's fused husk inside of Unicron, you're like, wow, that's kind of cool. Um, but they start off with great continuity and then just turned into the Space Odyssey. Again, there were downfalls because even though you see them in their original forms at some point or another, because they have a new toy, they get reformatted into lesser impressive forms. Um, it's just kind of, with the exception of Wing Saber, who's a new one, but his reformat came at a good thing. The other guys, they Tidal Wave was one of the more severe cases. Demolisher, Cyclonus, who became Snowcat, they just didn't. They didn't get a fair shake, I don't think. So anyway, that's just kind of my review, because whenever they basically ended the Unicron threat, they still had to have a series to go, and everything from that point on really isn't even worth mentioning because it was filler, to be honest. They built up from the beginning of the series to the middle where they destroyed Unicron. They built it up, and they had a great story arc in there. But basically, after that point, after Megatron became Galvatron again, there's really nothing in there worth mentioning because it was basically filler. So as far as Energon goes, that's where we're going to leave that, and we'll pick up with Transformers Cybertron. Okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because, well, it doesn't deserve it, and I've spent way much more time on this than I wanted to. Okay, we're going to start off on Transformers Cybertron. Basically, there are so many things wrong with this final installment of the trilogy that I'd take all day. It would take all day to describe the things wrong with this series. There's a lot of plot holes and a lot of just inconsistencies, and people try to explain it, and really there's no reason to, and there's really no reason to go over it that much. They start off, and when we saw the previews for it, we were like, okay, this is gonna be great. This is gonna be Return to Beast Wars style. It's gonna be all animated and all this and that, and really, there was a lot of it was disappointing all the way around. Story stunk. The action figures were deplorable. And really, when you got down to it, it was Hasbro's fault for trying to link this to the other two. We kind of like it, but it's kind of difficult because in over in Japan, where this originated from, they started it off as a new series. Yet in America, they were like, okay, we're going to link this somehow. And, there wasn't too many problems, but there still were some. Starscream was a big issue because he had been Megatron's lapdog in the previous one, and in this one he does a 180 and becomes more like G1 Starscream. And there's so many things wrong with it. In Energon, Kicker was really annoying. In Cybertron, it gets even worse because all three of the kids, you just want to slap them, and you're hoping Megatron will step on them or something and put them out of your misery, but it doesn't happen. And the one of the biggest beefs I have with this whole series is that the Cyber Planet keys, which are the main arc of this whole story, is what they're after. it has the power to reformat Transformers. And one of, I guess it's a Japanese style of storytelling. It happened in Energon too, but in Cybertron it was more prominent. Is the figures grow to these enormous, idiotic proportions. Starscream becomes the size of Cybertron at one point, and I'm just thinking, oh my God, what are they doing? And it gets stupid. There is so many stupid things about the series that I just cannot stress enough how stupid. Um, did I say stupid already? Because that's basically what this whole thing revolves around. Besides the Cyber Planet keys, is how idiotic can this story get, and then go past that even. Um, I putting this video together. I didn't have that much trouble with the first 2 points of this, but there's, like I said, this section of the story, you're just like, why did they even do it? It's like the Batman and Robin of the Transformers. It's like one of those things you wish you had never made. A lot of fans really like it. I'm sorry if you do. Real fans probably don't like it. You know, uh, I sold all of mine on eBay that I'd got from this series because I was so disgusted with the stupidity of it. Um, that's about it, really. They they the story, I can't even tell you about it because it changes directions so many times, and it's really kiddie. So I'm not going to waste my time or effort telling you about the story because it would be a waste of your time. And honestly, yeah, that's as much time as I feel like wasting telling you about Transformers Cybertron. Um, you know, Character development, story, interactions, realism, they all go out the window because there is none. It's just garbage. And to illustrate how stupid this is, they have a giant transformer in one episode. His name is Metroplex. The guy is like 12 stories tall, wields a giant axe his height or bigger, and Megatron, who's no bigger than his foot, or I'm sorry, Galvatron, he goes up against Metroplex. And this is how ridiculous it gets. Metroplex comes in full swing with the axe, and Galvatron stops it with his finger. Um, where is the realism in that? I know it's a cartoon show, but that's the kind of stupid stuff that happens in this cartoon. And yeah, so pretty much it ended on the whole thing. It started out great, and then went downhill, and then just went straight down the toilet. Um, yeah, you kind of just, for kids, I'm sure they loved it, which that's who it's aimed to. I'll openly admit that right here and there. And kids are like, "Oh my goodness, that's cool. He stopped it with a finger." But there's long-time fans that like to see what's new, what's going on, and ones like more modern shows like Transformers Prime and stuff. Both kids and longtime fans can enjoy that sort of stuff, but in Cybertron they strictly cater to 4-year-olds, and for longtime fans, it was disappointment. And everybody will have their take on it, but anyway, I've spent more time on it than I wanted to, and I hope you enjoyed my rant on this. But this has been a review for Armada, Energon, and Cybertron. So anyway, look forward to a review whenever my buddy will be in our next review. Cameron will be back. This was a solo review, and check us out. In the meantime, this is Midwest Reviews, signing off. Bye.